Today, I'm excited to welcome Tony M to the podcast. Tony is a critical thinker, Bitcoin advocate, and node runner. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Tony.
Hey, greetings, Paul. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's great to see you. I heard your story and I really wanted to chat with you. Your pinned tweet says, as a product of childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, addiction, poverty, etc., I acquired survival skills and adaptability skills from an early age. Bitcoin became an easy survival tool to adopt. So tell us about your Bitcoin journey.
Yeah, well, I guess going back to that tweet, I remember when I posted that. So I grew up surrounded by extreme poverty, addiction, alcoholism. Everything in that tweet, and it was a really rough childhood. The hunger, the homelessness. A lot of those things. And I became somewhat of a product of that environment. Where there really wasn't much hope, and it was hard to even try to get ahead in life because I was always involved in actions or activities of my own that were knocking me back down, through poor choices and poor life choices. There's been times throughout life where I could build things up, but because of my own mental, emotional health and drugs and alcoholism, I would knock myself back down as an adult, even, and so um, when I began my Bitcoin journey in 2020, I was in recovery, and what I recognized was that the world wasn't right. Pretty much overnight, everything became uncertain with the pandemic. They shut down global production. They started printing trillions of dollars, and they just started bombarding us with all this information, this doom and gloom. And so, the world became uncertain overnight. And I had a lot of capital saved up, and I really wasn't sure what to do with that. But I wanted to plant it somewhere, as a safe haven. And so what I did was I bought gold, I bought silver, I bought Bitcoin, and I bought crypto. I took that journey in the beginning as well. Later, I converted all of that and into straight Bitcoin. Um, I when I got into Bitcoin, I didn't know anything about it really. I mean, I had heard about it in 2013 when a friend of mine was mining it, and I asked him about it back then, but didn't get involved in it. Uh, I read about it again in 2017 during that bull run when it climbed pretty exponentially. And I actually had a coworker that was buying it at the time. But even in those periods, I still had a lot of instability in my own life. So I just wasn't ready to take that journey yet. I wasn't even ready to go down that rabbit hole yet. And so that's why I coined that saying, everybody gets Bitcoin when they're ready for Bitcoin. That one seems to be more fitting to me than everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve, because I think we all deserve Bitcoin, but some of us aren't ready. And so just because of life circumstances or finances or, just personal situations, there has to be a point where we become ready. And for me, it was the COVID crash of 2020, and so I didn't know who Satoshi was. I didn't know the Genesis block. I didn't know the halving. I didn't know the difficulty adjustment. I didn't know anything about it, but it just felt like a hedge, like let me put some here and see what happens. And I don't trust the banks. I don't know what's going to happen with the financial, I don't know if the banks are going to crash. I didn't know what was going to happen. So once I put skin in the game, I started researching it and studying, and I got lost in all of the noise because I was researching Bitcoin along with crypto, so it was all these different areas that I was researching. And eventually that noise just kind of narrowed down to that one thing, and so I try to focus and channel all of my time and energy into Bitcoin based on what I was learning from about it, that it's the most secure network in the world. It's finite. There's only going to ever be 21 million coins, and nobody can change that. That it's the most pristine asset ever discovered in human or ever created in human history. All of these things about it that just really fascinate me and that I believe in fundamentally through my own research. And so, yeah, it's been a 4.5 year journey now, and I go from not knowing who Satoshi was to we're about to adopt a dog and we're going to name him after Satoshi. So yeah, it's just been a really incredible journey, and there's a lot of what it does is that hope that I didn't have as a child, or that some of that despair and uncertainty, a lot of that has been removed, by me taking some personal responsibilities and in my life, and like vesting myself in something that gives us humanity hope, and not just for our system and for Americans. I mean, this is a global phenomenon, that's available to 8 billion people, and to me, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, I love that. I relate to your story. I have alcoholism in my family, so I know how that goes. I'm sure a lot of people do. there's there's a lot of hope and despair, and sometimes people turn to alcohol to deal with that. And I love that you said that we get Bitcoin when we're ready, because I always think that's harsh. We get Bitcoin when we deserve. I'm
Yeah.
in Africa right now, and there's a lot of people who deserve it, and they just don't have the education, and they just don't even have the extra dollar. But it's there.
Yes, and I have a lot of friends and family from various demographics and economic circumstances, whatnot. And so I there's people in my own circle that deserve it, um, but they're not ready for it because of just the rat race of the fiat system that they're trying to get ahead in. Where you're trying to pay rent or pay your mortgage and take care of your family and pay the bills. We have these this fiat system that's devaluing everything, devaluing your dollar, your earning potential or your purchasing power, and it makes it you're having to spin in that rat race harder just to keep afloat, And so these people deserve it, but they're not ready for it because they haven't found that exit point where they're able to convert some of that time and energy and labor from the fiat system towards Bitcoin. I've had several friends that I thought I orange pilled and they bought Bitcoin. And because of that rat race, and where they're at in their own personal, in their personal lives, they were not able to keep that Bitcoin. They've had to cash out, to buy a house or to pay bills or because of job loss and those sort of circumstances. And those people deserve Bitcoin, but they're not ready for it.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
that's it.
yeah, and that's one of the things where the whole everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. I just think it's really off-putting and arrogant. And so that's my opinion. So
Yeah, I'm grateful that I was open to it and ready. And the other thing that when people get Bitcoin is they have a need for it. I don't have enough for retirement, or I'm not making enough money to buy a house. And and so there has to be enough pain for a lot of people to get Bitcoin.
yeah, absolutely. Pain's a motivator too. It can be. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you've been sober for 8 years. How do you think this has helped your Bitcoin journey? Like I've decided I'm going to have an alcohol-free year just because even though I don't drink often, when I just feel more clear when I don't drink. And I see a lot of people in the Bitcoin space not like saying the same thing that they're going to give up alcohol. So I'd love to hear how your experience has been.
Yeah. So yeah, January 21st of this year will be 8 years since I've had my last drink. But I actually consider my sober clean date to be December 30th. On December 30th, I had 4 years. I obtained 4 years from any mood or mind altering substance. So where Bitcoin has been important in my recovery is because once I removed the drugs and alcohol, it I had to start working on all the things that Tony needed to work on, things from childhood, my character defects, my shortcomings, making amends, having a relationship with a higher power. And I'm part of a 12-step program that has helped with a lot of those things. But I also had to address a lot of emotional, mental issues, and get some outside assistance, professional assistance. And so, kind of going through those those steps and that journey is whenever I finally had an opportunity to try to start planning for a future, because I could never really plan for a future because I was always too unstable and could never keep anything, in life. And so, I mean, I've probably started over in my adult life 3 or 4 times, and I'm 49 years old now. And so making some of those amends and that growth, some of those amends were personal amends to myself as well. So going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole allowed me to first, it was allowed me to make up for lost time and energy and waste of wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout my adult life. That's kind of how I looked at it from a financial perspective. But the hope and the spiritual side is, like, to me, it has this purity to it because it gives a level playing field to the world that's not going to be corrupted by these global elites and these institutions because of the purity of the protocol. Basically, there's something very spiritual to me about it, that's hard to put into words. But fiat, just from everything I understand and know about the fiat system, is corrupt, and I think there's an evilness to it because it maliciously robs everyone of their time and energy, which takes away from their families, which takes away from their time with their families, which is, when you really break it down and you look through the history of it, you can see how it has led to the decays of society throughout history, and it's hidden from us, and it's hidden from us intentionally, and we're lied to and deceived about, like consumer price index. They use this basket of goods to tell us what the inflation rate is every quarter, and those numbers are manipulated, and they're not telling us that it's a result of them expanding the money supply, and the Cantillon effect, and how there's just so much corruption with it, associated with it, when we're sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine for money laundering and as foreign aid. But that's part of what keeps the fiat system going. It's part of that. It's an expansion of the money and credit, while these politicians and these global elites are siphoning off the top. And so what we're seeing in society from that is the drugs, the poverty, the despair, the moral decay, the divorce rate, the single parent homes. All of those things trickle into that, and so, like, we had a really great opportunity post World War II, when it was all the GIs came home, and they got the GI Bill, and that's whenever you could have single family homes or single income homes where the husband or the dad worked and mom stayed home with the kids, and they were able to have a nice home, a nice car, and send the kids to college, and not, it wasn't a debt based system yet. We were still operating under a gold standard somewhat after the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. Understanding that, how it's kind of trickled through history, where you went from post World War II into the Vietnam area and the Great Society, where Johnson started spending all this money, and then France and other countries wanted their gold back because they seen that we were getting too malicious with the money. And then you go into 1971, the Nixon shock of 1971, where he removed us from the gold standard. So, I was born in 1975, and what I tell a lot of my my Gen X friends and people that I associate with is, we were robbed before we were ever even born, and we were born into this system of corrupt fiat, and didn't even none of that was ever taught to us. We've been thinking the dollar is this money our whole lives, and it's not even a money. It's fiat is by decree, or because we said so. That's what gives it value. And then they have the arrogance to put "in God we trust" on the currency. It is inherently evil. The spiritual side is that, understanding that we are spokes in a wheel, or cogs in this machine, this fiat machine that is inherently corrupt, and we weren't given a choice. We don't have a choice. And understanding that, and then finding Bitcoin and the Bitcoin rabbit hole, has opened up this whole other paradigm of thinking for me, as an escape from that system, or an alternative, an alternative to that system. Me buying Bitcoin is almost like a protest. At times, like, I can get mad at the system, or what happens in Washington, or what happens in Ukraine, or what happens with all the waste. But I understand it. It's such a clown world simulation type thing. Like, some things are just completely unbelievable of what's going on. But I understand why, because that's how the fiat system operates. And so, instead of getting mad, what am I going to go do? Protest in Washington? Am I going to, go give speeches? No, I'm going to protest with my money. I'm I'm going to transfer my time and energy from that fiat system into a Bitcoin standard. And it's not 100%. I still think in fiat terms. I still operate in the fiat system, but it has done some things that have fundamentally changed my life. I have low time preference now. I've become more of a material minimalist. Before Bitcoin, one of my things that I like to collect was watches. It's nice fancy watches. And after I adopted Bitcoin, since then, I haven't bought a watch in over 4.5 years. And since that time, anytime I feel this desire to buy some shiny object I don't need, I'll take that equal amount of dollars and buy Bitcoin instead. And it gives me a better dopamine rush. And it gives me that long term satisfaction of knowing that I'm not only helping my future self, but my family's future, and it's not something that's going to, there's no CEO or company tied behind it. So I don't have to worry about whether it's going to go bankrupt or the CEO is going to get arrested in 10 years. Because of what my understanding of the Bitcoin network and how it works, I feel confident that it's still going to be around 10 years from now, as long as it stays decentralized and secure, like Jeff Booth says, and that 10-year saving technology is going to be exponentially higher. And so that's part of the spiritual side of it is knowing that I'm diverting some of my time and energy into something that's not corrupt, with this caveat of possibly helping future generations, while allowing us to have this evil, or this level playing field that we can all participate in.
Wow, you brought up so many great things there. Just to comment on the spiritual side, I always like to ask people that. And what I was thinking when you were sharing is that also, by having a sound money and a money that we can save in, that now allows me to do what I love instead of what I need to do to survive. And just that in itself, living your purpose and passion. And I know not everybody knows that, but it gives you the opportunity to look and to get to know yourself, rather than, like you mentioned, some of your friends spinning their wheels to try to just survive. Making a certain amount of money is very difficult to buy a house and to do all that.
Well, and that's the analogy. That's one of the examples I try to give with people. I call them the normies. I put it in the context of buying a home. Because that's what we've been taught to be the American dream, was to buy the home, and that's your greatest asset. That's your most valuable asset. That's how we were raised in the system. And what a lot of people don't really realize, because it was before our time, is that homes were only supposed to have this utility value of being a place of shelter, your domicile where you raised your family, and so, when it was, I don't know what the cost was in the 70s or before the Nixon shock of 71, but in the 60s it would have been, between $10,000 and $25,000 to buy a home, and live comfortably. And it has become this investment vehicle since the 1970s, where fiat, the money has to, the value has to be transferred somewhere. And so because the currency doesn't have value, the society, or investors are looking for the safest place to park that investment. And somehow it has become in real estate, and so real estate, homes have become monetized, and so I think when I bought my first home in 2007, it was $155,000 at the time. 15 years later, it was 400,000. And so everyone thinks that that this is a great asset because it has doubled or more than doubled, but really it's because of the devaluation of the currency, and that devaluing dollar is going into real estate. And so the problem with that I see is that has robbed a lot of younger people the opportunity to get home, to buy a home, and that's really sad. Like I can remember being at 20 years old and I could barely pay rent, and I think my rent was like 500 a month, and now rent's like $2,000 a month for the same sort of floor plan. And like I couldn't imagine being in my 20s or 30s, having to face that sort of dilemma, and so real estate was never supposed to be a place where you an investment vehicle. And so what I try to what I try to explain to people is that Bitcoin is a better investment vehicle because it's going to outperform real estate, and so you know, last year a $500,000 home would have cost 12 Bitcoin, and now it's like 5.6 Bitcoin or something like that. I don't remember the number, but all the prices fall in terms of Bitcoin, and so, and that's what I tell people. So right now it may be 5 Bitcoin for a house, but eventually it's going to be 1 Bitcoin for a house. And then eventually it's going to be a half. And, and whenever, it's funny because I didn't really grasp that part until my third year in Bitcoin, and really when I grasped it was whenever we were going to buy a house, and decided to buy Bitcoin instead. I backed out of the home loan, didn't like the terms of the loan, and I think we're up 180% on that down payment. And what was interesting is I told myself when that down payment doubled in value, then I would take the profit and use that to buy the home. But it actually doubled within like 6 months. But during that 6 month period, I was researching Bitcoin versus real estate and started to realize, wow, like why would I trade this superior asset for a lesser value? I mean, for a lesser quality asset with that has counterparty risk, overhead, insurance, tax every year, and so it didn't make sense to me, and then I get people say, well, you can't live in your Bitcoin. Well, you can't, but again, homes were only supposed to have the utility value of being a domicile, a place where you live. And so, I don't have to have a nice fancy home. I'd rather have a superior asset that's going to outperform everything else. And I can just, again, I can just be a material minimalist and be happy. I don't have to keep up with the Joneses, and the home that we were going to buy was a really nice home. And what's interesting about it is I drove by there like last week, and it's already on the market again. It's been on the market for several months, and there was cracks in the foundation and in the sidewalk. And I was like, I told my wife, I'm glad we didn't buy that house. So because you'd already have maintenance costs going on, So
Someone's taking care of you. You know,
yeah,
do you think there'd be a point where you might take some profits to buy a home?
that was the other thing. I told myself once it doubled, then I would use the profit to buy Bitcoin. And then I told myself, well, once a house is equal to 1 Bitcoin, maybe we'll buy a second home. But really that's just me, allows me to move the goalposts, because knowing what I know now, once a Bitcoin equals a house, I'm going to say, well, let's just wait until zero point 0.5 Bitcoin buys the house. And then let's just wait till 0.25, so I'll just keep moving the goalposts. And what it does is allow me to just set new goals and keep my goals that I have, which is to accumulate and stack Satoshis over time, you know. But that being said, taking profits or selling in the world that I see that's coming, we won't have to, be able to borrow against it as collateral. That's already happening. There's I won't name names, but there's some companies out there that are doing that. And I'm really just kind of standing on the sidelines, just watching and waiting, because I consider it like first generation. So I want to see this thing develop before I even entertain that idea. But that's what I see is borrowing against it, loaning it for a yield, maybe at the MicroStrategy World Bitcoin Bank, who knows? Um, or you just use it as a medium of exchange, take my phone at the point of sale and boom, and it converts Satoshis to whatever currency they're using at the point of sale, So that's kind of how I see it. My intention is to never sell.
It's a good intention. So I know that you mentioned Jeff Booth and you read his book, right? The
Yes,
natural state of the free market is deflationary.
inflationary.
And I had no idea what that meant
I
until I
know.
read his book. And I think many people don't. And that's part of the problem. Many people, like you mentioned, don't realize that that inflation is theft and that even 2% is theft. Do you think they really know? All of them know in the government positions and in the central banks I know the people at the top know what they're doing, but do you think everybody knows that they are taking advantage of the world?
I no, I don't believe it. I believe it's just the ones that are in charge that are high level. I mean, because and the reason I say that is because I hear economists and politicians speak in ways that I don't even think they're lying sometimes. I think they're just ignorant. I think they just don't know, and it blows my mind, I mean, so I didn't know until Ron Paul. Ron Paul introduced me to the fallacies of inflation and the Federal Reserve and the money printing. But even then, because where I was in life, again, I wasn't ready. So I listened to what Ron Paul was saying, but I didn't really grasp it on a deep level, or I was caught up in my own rat race. So it didn't really fundamentally sink in. But it wasn't until I got into the Bitcoin journey when really I started wrapping my head around a lot of these things, like the Cantillon effect, and how every war in the 20th century was was a banker's war, perpetuated by central banks and the Federal Reserve, and how they fund all sides of wars, and so it made sense. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 passed, and then a year later the World War One starts, and so I think all of these tie into each other, and and the ones in control, they're aware. They're aware. I mean, the creatures from Jekyll Island. The meeting of the of the elite that allowed for the creation of the Federal Reserve. They know exactly what they were doing, and they pulled it off. And then it's no coincidence that the Income Tax Act passed immediately after the Federal Reserve Act, which is again the theft of our time and our theft of our labor, so and we just, we're so conditioned for that to be normal. Like it's extracted from us right out of our employer. So before we even, most people before they even get their check, it's that tax has already been extracted. And that's the funny thing because since 20 inflation started really hitting the economy and people started feeling the effects of it, that's when people start paying attention. But there's still a lot of lack of knowledge because people was, I see memes about they tax what you make and then they tax everything that you buy, and your real estate, sales, property tax, like I mean, not just income tax, sales tax. I mean, all these taxes, fishing license tax, all these taxes. And so there'll be this long list of taxes, but the thing that's missing from that is the inflation. People don't say, well, so not only are we taxed, but everything we have to pay this tax with money that they have devalued, the purchasing power of. So that is evil. And a lot of people don't like wrap their heads around that. Like we're paying these taxes with devalued money, and that devaluation is in itself a tax. It's a regressive hidden tax that's hidden from society in order to keep this thing going, because and like understanding those things, like we have these endless wars, either we're fighting them or we're funding them or we're backing them or we're instigating them between other nations. And what people don't, like it's easy for us to say, yeah, go get them or go take out those terrorists because as a society, we don't have any skin in the game. It's all being funded with perpetual money printing, right? And so we're not feeling the effects of it because it's a slow drip with this inflation. In history, the way wars were funded was people had to, they basically went to war until they were broke, and then somebody had to surrender, and you sent the men off to war, and so that put skin in the game with society. Eventually, if a government or ruler was going to bankrupt themselves through war, the population would rise up and say, no more war, and we don't do that because again it's that fiat system that allows these things to perpetuate. And so it's just I see the fiat system, the fiat monetary system, and the Federal Reserve System is a scourge on society, and I really wish that more people would wake up to that. And there's people that surprise me that, a couple years ago, they wouldn't have known anything about fiat or the Federal Reserve System, but I wish there would be this great awakening because I see it as a way for society to start moving in a different direction, especially with, I tell people we're living through history right now. Like these are historical times right now. the world is waking up to the fiat system. That's why there's the formation of BRICS, BRICS countries. And we have 36 trillion plus dollars in debt, and this is all unsustainable. Like it's, at some point there has to be a transition or a breaking point, right? And so that's why I think that like with the creation of Bitcoin, these are historical times because as Jeff Booth says, as long as it stays decentralized and secure, it's going to reprice everything. It's going to continue to reprice everything, and like it's its 16th birthday today and we're so early. So there's a lot of things that can upset me with what goes on in the world, but there's also this hope, because like, wow, these are also exciting times, and yes, we are in the fourth turning, but there's so much opportunity here, and people just have to choose to walk through that door, you know, and become ready.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the 16th birthday because that is huge. It is a gift to the world and for anybody ready and willing to put in the time because talking to you, I can tell you've put in a lot of time. What are some of your resources where you learn and who you learn from?
Um, a lot of YouTube, obviously Saylor. I've been listening to Michael Saylor since the beginning. I mean, he so I bought my first Bitcoin in April of 2020. I think MicroStrategy bought their first in August of 2020. So I like to brag that I front ran MicroStrategy.
Cool.
I just didn't do it as quite as big. But from listening to Saylor when the lockdowns happened, he was with some colleague of his or some friend of his, and they started talking about Bitcoin, and this guy kind of introduced Michael Saylor to Bitcoin, and it took him down that rabbit hole. And I want to say that was like in March of 2020, and that was right at the same time I started kind of going down that rabbit hole myself. So I've always been really fond of Saylor since the beginning. There are some things that concern me here and there with his developments and kind of the way things are going, but I haven't seen enough red flags to unfriend him or unfan him, So, but then obviously Jeff Booth, Jeff Booth was. It's funny because I actually avoided listening to Jeff Booth for probably 2 years because I could not intellectually grasp what he was saying. It was just too above my head, really, and like too deep, And so I've had to play Jeff Booth on repeat, but it's fascinating because I believe everything he's saying, and I believe it's very sincere and it's genuine and it's organic and it's very highly intellectual and highly foreseeing, foreseeing of the future. I listen to Robert Breedlove, the What Is Money show. He has a pretty good podcast. Bitcoin for Millennials. I get my news from Simply Bitcoin Daily, Swan Daily. So I don't watch the news at all. But when I come home at night, I like to turn on my daily news episode. I've read the Bitcoin Standard twice. I like it. It's a really good. In fact, I think I've gifted that book to several people. I've given that book out. Anytime I gift it, I'll sign it and I'll put today's date or the date and the price of whenever I gift it to people. So it's kind of a thing that I like to do. Twitter is a great source of information. I follow a lot of good Twitter profiles or X profiles I think I probably get most of my information from X at this point, just because it's constant and it's up to date and it's current, So it's a really good source if once you weed out the noise. So that's what I try to do. I try to weed out the noise and just try to focus the time and energy into some of the credible sources. I try to stay in tune. So if there's developments that are happening, I like to be current on them just because I like to be in the know. Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just constant. There's so much information out there. There really is. Even the quality of some of these podcasts and some of these interviews and some of these news sites, well, like Swan Daily or Simply Bitcoin, they weren't even that quality 4.5 years ago. Whenever I got into this, they were still kind of not fringe, but not as well known, and now there's just this constant flow of great information and current information and trends and Like even a couple weeks ago, whenever they started about talking about quantum computers that could threaten the Bitcoin network, and there was all these immediate responses to that, and so yeah, I mean, it's all this information is available to everyone. You just have to choose to be ready for it, you know.
Yeah, you mentioned some great sources. I listened to all of those too. And Jeff Booth has definitely been one of my biggest influences, and I have to listen several times. I heard
Yeah,
a comment on the quantum issue, and he said that, like many others have said, it's so small right now, and when it becomes bigger, the Bitcoin network will come up with a solution because there's so many smart.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some really highly intelligent people that are I consider the guardians of Bitcoin. They're ahead of all of these hypothetical what ifs. These people are already on that. They're already way ahead of that. So I don't lose sleep. I don't lose sleep at night, and I'm not going to. I mean, Bitcoin could drop to 50,000 overnight, and I still wouldn't lose sleep. I would I would immediately find out what's going on, what ripples are happening right now that are causing this, just because I want to know. But I'm not going to freak out. I'm gonna buy.
And that's partly because there's more to Bitcoin, right? You and I are moving over, like you said, to another protocol that has more truth, hope, and abundance than our fiat system. And we want that. We want more truth, hope, and abundance for the world and ourselves.
Yes, and our and the people we love. And again, that's part of that spiritual part for me is um I kind of came from nothing, and nothing was left for me. And so to have this opportunity to change that generationally is very that's very moving for me. That's a really huge thing for me. And again, that fiat mindset that I had before Bitcoin, that all of us have before Bitcoin, is buy it, take out loans for it. Like we're a consumer society. We're taught to consume. You know, take out loans and buy stuff. So it's to spend the money that we're getting as we're getting it, or take out loans for money that we don't even have yet, and pay over time and pay those interest rates on. And that's a rat race. And so having this Bitcoin mentality is, I want to accumulate as much Bitcoin as I can, and I can do without. I don't need all those things. Like I just need simple things and life experiences. Like, some of the biggest expenditures that we take is we like to travel. We take vacations, go on trips, and those are memories. Those are life experiences, man. Those are important. And so I'd rather do those things than have some shiny object that's going to depreciate in value and that I'm paying interest on. You know, the Bitcoin journey, going deep down the Bitcoin journey, can really be life changing in a lot of ways. I eat steak and eggs every day now. I eat beef fat. I used to hate fat. I've just learned a lot of things about health and nutrition over time, and I think being a Bitcoiner has been part of that. You know,
I've heard a lot of Bitcoiners say they're on the carnivore diet, and I got into the health part of life. Did that early. I don't do the carnivore diet per se, but I eat meat, I eat fat, I eat as natural as possible. I also eat vegetables. But I think whatever works for you, right? And as long as it's
sure,
being healthy.
yeah. Like I said, if I hadn't have gotten into recovery, there's no way I would have ever been able to take the Bitcoin journey. And so again, it's I tell people this too. Like Bitcoin is a fundamental part of my recovery, because it's allowing me to make up for lost time, and it's allowing me to make self amends and amends to the future, like for the security and well being of my family. And so that's very like that's to me that's really deep. That's a really deep thing.
And to
So
have low time preference, like you mentioned. I love the not
yeah,
buying shiny objects. I'm around family now, and some of them are very into that,
yeah,
and they enjoy life, and that's fine. They don't see Bitcoin like I see it, but as I get older, and I was a realtor in Miami, so I saw how much stuff people have. When you go to sell a house, and they keep it in closets for 30 years, and I just realized, what's the point? I love experiences and travel, like you said. And I do get it that your home is a special place. That's why I asked if you take profits, because Checkmate, I interviewed him and he said he would take profits to buy a nice home for his family. And I get
Mm,
that. But to buy a watch, or maybe a watch is okay, but 10, no. And to buy five fancy cars, no, I'd rather have Bitcoin.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, and again, everyone that I've known who has sold their Bitcoin regretted it. And that's the thing is I I don't want to take profits and then it 10x's in 4 years. Like man, I should have kept that. So again, I think that the the ecosystem is building to a level where, again, borrowing against it, using it as collateral with a safe, secure third party, and maybe have it's FDIC insured, those sort of backings. Um, I think that'll be probably the realm of possibility, pretty soon. So yeah.
Do you think a lot of people will come into Bitcoin as the price goes up? Like many of us did, right? We come in for number go up, but then we stay for what it stands for.
It's difficult because of unit bias. Everyone thinks they're too late for Bitcoin, and so they jump into these XRPs and these fart coins and these meme coins. And I get it. Like, well, I don't get it, but I understand the reasons because, again, it's that fiat race that we're accustomed to. It's like gambling. It's like going to the casino, but and people see the gains or whatnot. It's difficult. The challenge I have with orange pilling people is the unit bias, and so I try to break it down in simple terms of Satoshis, the 100 million Satoshis to a Bitcoin. And right now it's, 1,000 Satoshis for $1. And at some point, by the time, a Satoshi is equal to 1 penny, then a Bitcoin will be worth $1 million. So I try to break through that unit bias by breaking it down like that. Like, we're still early, like four and a half, it has 10x in 4.5 years, and another 10x is $1 million. And so it's inevitable. Whether it's going to be within 4 years, is it going to be within six, we don't know. I mean, if nation states started trying to do a global arms race to adopt it into their strategic reserves, which is a huge possibility, we may see some jumps that we've never seen. And without bear markets, we may have some sideways action as it continues to climb over time. And so again, these are historical times, man. And so it's interesting though, because I started having more people ask me about it when it hit 100,000. People haven't been asking me about it the last 2 years. They weren't asking me about it in 2022 when it was at $16,000. I had people criticizing me at that time. Yeah, your Bitcoin's down, And so there's some memes out there that address that, like $10,000, nah, I don't want it. $20,000, nah, I don't want it. $60,000, nah, I don't want it. $100,000, give me all of it. I want all the Bitcoin. And so I don't know. I don't know how the unit bias will continue, but if it doubles again, there's going to be people asking about it, and so there's so much noise out there, though. That's the challenge, is all these other altcoins and the noise, what I call it.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, because there are some people who make good money in those altcoins.
Yeah.
And what made you realize that yes, you can make good money and you might do well, and then you could put the profits into Bitcoin, but you could also lose a lot and be rug pulled.
Well, I made a decision to concentrate my time and energy into one thing. So I never really, even before this journey, I didn't really like the idea of diversification, because it seems to spread you out too thin, too many different areas. And so, I always wanted there to be one thing to just go all in on, and so for me, it was, I think the transition became ideal, whereas it was something, it was a protocol that I believed in. I was fascinated by the Immaculate Conception and the anonymous creator, all of those features, the difficulty adjustment, the Byzantine general's dilemma, the supply cap, all of those things really fascinated me. That it's backed by energy, That allowed me to channel that time and energy into that one thing. And whereas I see everything else as associated with the fiat system, the fiat rat race, all these other to me, all these other altcoins, and I don't even pay attention to them anymore. I don't. That's just my personal choice. I don't follow them. I don't study them. I did in the beginning, and again, it was too much confusion. And like, do I go here? Do I go there? Do this? And that's just not my strategy. So I just see all of those things part of that same system that Jeff Booth talks about, the fart coins and the meme coins, and it's all this rat race with their institutions and developers and investors that have created them or been a part of that in the pre-mines. It's like I tell people the difference between for me, my interpretation of the difference between Bitcoin and crypto is that Bitcoin's the only one that the only way you can shut it down is a global shutdown of the internet and electricity. And if that happens, we have bigger issues going on than Bitcoin. We have a lot. And so whereas these others, theoretically, they could be shut down with a protocol change, a court order, FBI raid, an arrest. The rules can be changed, and so that's just not something that I wanted to gamble in or participate in, So
Yeah. I hear you saying it's just keeping life more simple. And
yeah,
yeah. And plus it, like you said, it's got all the qualities that many of those other coins don't have. No leader, 21 million, decentralized, secure. I want
yeah.
to read you. I heard you say this. I don't buy Bitcoin. I simply convert the abstract representation of my time and energy denominated by a flawed system into the most secure savings technology in human history. Just explain that a little bit to us. It's wonderful.
Well, the dollar bill, the dollar is an abstract concept. It is of our time and energy. So in exchange for the time and energy that we put into something, we're given money, what's called money, but actually it's a currency, which this currency is losing its value when you receive it, as you hold it. It's a melting ice cube. And so in order to preserve that time and energy, you have to take that dollar and transfer it into something else, and whether that's stocks, bonds, gold, equities, real estate, And so based on my own experience, my own understanding, I can take that concept, that abstract time and energy, and pull it away from that melting ice cube and putting it into a superior asset that is it's scarce, it's secure, it's backed by energy. It's not backed by fiat, which fiat again is by decree or because we said so, which is so arrogant. Like we said fiat, we said it has value, so there it is, and that fiat has been corrupted all throughout history for thousands of years. So there's time with that proves it. All throughout history, gold has been the best store of value, and was the accepted store of value all throughout human history. And Bitcoin was able to surpass that and solve problems that gold doesn't have, or solve problems that gold has, which is the divisibility, the transportability, the supply cap. A lot of people don't know this, but Bitcoin became more scarce than gold at this last halving. The inflation rate of Bitcoin is now lower than the inflation rate of gold forever. And so, I mean, we've never had anything like this in human history. Gold has been the store of value, the medium of exchange for thousands of years, and even it got corrupted and pushed out by this fiat system. So it's lost its way. Bitcoin is here. It's this shining star on a hill, this shining beacon on a hill that allows everyone to transfer their time and energy into something more superior and secure and safe, that because of the way that it's designed, as long as it stays decentralized and secure, it's only going to increase in value. Your time and energy is only going to increase in value over time. And so, like, it's really deep. It's really fundamental. And I'm not a philosophical kind of guy. I mean, I can be, but it really takes me into those philosophical realms.
But the one thing I was thinking, because somebody said this to me, but I can't see it and I can't touch it.
Well, you can't see and touch air either, but we need it.
And we don't know how electricity works, but we need that too.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's what when people say, "Well, you can't live in your Bitcoin." Well, you can't live in your stocks and bonds and equities and gold either, you know? So, we're, just like intrinsic value. I mean, value is what people agree upon. I like the analogy of cigarettes being a form of money in prison. That's in that circular society, that closed society, those cigarettes actually are become a form of payment. They're a money that people agree to in a system. And so that's, I mean, we live in a system where there's really no agreement. We're told this dollar bill is money, and we're told that the reason that things are expensive is because of all these other things, all these other reasons. It's not because we're inflating the money supply exponentially and stealing the value of your time and energy. They're not saying that. No one ever says that. You're not taught that in school. You're not going to be taught that in college. And I've come across financial advisors that don't even know that or starting to learn it, but didn't really have a concept of that previously, which is really just fascinating.
Yeah, it is. That even economists aren't. I've spoken to economists and they said they weren't taught it in university.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're coming to the end. My favorite question: how has Bitcoin changed you?
It has changed me where I look at everything through a fiat lens, meaning that, like I said, all the L's that are going on in society and in the world, a lot of it can point back to the money and to the way that the fiat monetary system operates. Like I said, when we have a problem in society here, but there's billions of dollars being sent overseas for various reasons. Like, it didn't used to make sense to me, but it does now because it's the way to keep the system going, and so it's changed me in that way, where I'm not as jaded about it. There's more of an acceptance of that system. Like, that's the system. And so finding that alternative way to opt out of that, like Jeff Booth talks about, that's one of the fundamental ways. Like, it's given me an escape route, if you will. That's what I tell family and friends is like, at some point, if there's ever a tipping point, we just go somewhere where it's Bitcoin friendly. We'll go to a Bitcoin friendly nation or a Bitcoin friendly state or community, like, so there's hope there instead of this hopelessness, like, so I think that's one of the ways it's changed me again. And the low time preference, that is really big for me as well, so
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I really appreciate you being on today.
yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, I appreciate it, Paula. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And where can people find you?
You can find me on X. It's my hashtag is Kurt Cocaine. And it's funny because that was a karaoke stage name back in the '90s.
That's a great name.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
I'll put a link at the bottom so people can
Okay,
find you.
very good.
Have a lot
Yeah,
of
thank
great
you.
stuff. And yeah, keep up the great work and the education because we want more Bitcoiners to see
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Polly. I appreciated the conversation. It was good talking to you.
Thank you.